LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 10th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. At the start today, I have to say I am an attorney in your chat room, so according to Donald Trump Jr., anything you say is protected by attorney-client privilege. Though that's actually a very bogus claim, and that's actually the last clip I'll be showing of the 16 clips I picked out, the weekend's best clips, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows for which would be a really educational, fair use, media criticism, and political analysis show for you all tonight. I have two political comedy clips I've taken from last night's Saturday Night Live, one from the Santa cold open and one from Weekend Update. In addition to those jokes, I'll have 14 actual news clips that come from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can see the two topics I'm covering listed down in the video description. If you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll put time indexes down in there so you can click between the topics if you want. I also put a link down there to my list of my 16 clips so you can read my notes and try to figure out what I meant, and you can at least tell who's talking in which clip and what the topic is. The second topic, which I have 4 clips at the end on, is the continuing Russia scandal and Donald Trump Jr.'s testimony and his invocation of attorney-client privilege and how bogus that is. That'll be at the end. And also the way Fox News and the Trump administration is trying to undermine the Mueller investigation. But before I get to that, I have 12 clips on the continuing backlash from bad behavior by mostly men. 3 people are out of Congress this week. Senator Al Franken, Representative Conyers, and Representative Franks from the House of Representatives. So that was the big topic, and this also was the topic of the political comedy clips I'm going to start with. The first one is the cold open, where Santa is getting some tough questions from the kids about what's going on in the news. This is like the first little under 2 minutes of the cold open. As usual, you can watch the entire Saturday Night Live cold open by going down to a link in the video description. Here's the part I wanted to share with you that I'll discuss with you after we watch it together here.
Ho, ho, ho.
Hey, what about you, my little boy? Are you ready to talk to Santa?
Yeah!
All right, well, get on up here, young man. What's your name?
Tyler,
And Tyler, what would you like Santa to bring you this year?
could I get a Mega Bloks dinosaur?
Well, I think that can be arranged.
And could I get laser tag?
Well, I can certainly try.
And can you tell me, what did Al Franken do?
Oh, okay, wow. Let's see. I think I can handle the Mega Bloks and the laser tag. Can you take the Al Franken thing, Sugar Plum?
No. And in this climate, can you just call me Amy?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, Tyler, I guess you could say that Al Franken is on Santa's naughty list this year.
And what about Roy Moore? Which list is he on?
It's not really a list, it's more of a registry.
Okay, you know what? We should keep this line moving along. Okay, ho, 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 Merry Christmas, Tyler.
Yes.
Okay, who's up next?
Hi, Santa. I'm Jessica.
Merry Christmas, Jessica. What would you like from Santa?
I wanted to follow up on Tyler's question. Is President Trump on the naughty list?
Well, you know, Santa tries to stay out of political matters. Our president may have said or done a few naughty things.
19 accusers, Google it.
Okay, can we not? Can we just not, Amy? Thanks. Look, Jessica, I'm sure we can all learn a lesson from what's going on in the news.
We sure can. I learned that if you admit you did something wrong, you get in trouble. But if you deny it, they let you keep your job.
Well, okay, well, did you know, careful there, Jessica, or you might get some coal in your stocking.
From where? We both know coal is a dying industry.
Okay, thank you very much. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
So that idea there from the second kid that if you admit that you did something wrong, then you're gone, but if you deny it, you get to keep your job, that there are a lot of people worrying that that is the new standard, and that's certainly something Republicans have been arguing, that, you know, that's the difference between Trump and Moore. Donald Trump and Roy Moore have denied everything, while Al Franken admitted some of it, and of course that's the problem with some of these others. But I'll be covering that, and whether the Democrats' attempt to take the moral high ground is an effective strategy. That'll come up in several of the clips. and it actually comes up in the Saturday Night Live Weekend Update jokes. First there are just some funny jokes in here, but then there's also this continuing theme about the Democrats' attempt to take the moral high ground and whether that's going to work. And I'll show, this is about a minute and 20 seconds from Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update last night over here.
Senator Al Franken announced his resignation this week in the wake of sexual harassment allegations, and yet Uncle Bad Touch is up 4 points in Alabama. You see, the Democrats hold themselves to a higher standard than anyone else, which is why they always lose. It's the same reason the Harvard football team sucks, because you also got to be a rocket scientist to play there. But to play for Alabama, you just got to be able to spell Bama. Democrats hope by forcing Al Franken to step down, they will paint themselves as the party of the moral high ground. Calm down, Democrats. You're still politician. You're the party of the morality the same way Don Jr. is the handsome Trump brother. Nobody actually likes you. Nobody likes Democrats. Nobody's at a party like, yo, you know who I wish was here? Nancy Pelosi. She's dope.
President Trump also endorsed Roy Moore this week, saying, "Go get him, Roy." Come on, man. When you're endorsing an accused child molester, you can't say, "Go get him." This isn't pedophile Pokemon. And if it is, we should probably keep an eye on Squirtle. By the way, "Go get him, Roy" is also what Roy Moore whispers to himself right before he walks into a hot topic.
So what do you think? Did you like the Squirtle and Hot Topic jokes there from Colin Jost? I don't know. I thought those were kind of funny, but the Michael Che series there at the beginning had more to do with this attempt by Democrats to take the moral high ground, and I guess that critique has some merit to it about that, all politicians are kind of tainted to begin with, and so there aren't really any politicians who get to take the moral high ground. You can let me know what you think about that down in the comment section. But now I want to get to the actual news clips. I'm going to show the news summaries from 4 of the 5 big corporate outlets, all except for CBS. CBS didn't really do a summary that had anything to do with the people getting kicked out of the Congress or Donald Trump and Roy Moore. They did a little coverage of that, but was one of the most downplayed, other than Fox News, which I will show sort of a montage of the way that they summarize. Well, I'll show how they summarize the Russia scandal, and I'll have a clip that they did actually cover the bad boy scandal. But the first news clip I want to show you is actually from NBC's Meet the Press, usually the best summary. I think it's the second best this week. The second one I'm going to show you is the best one from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where Martha Raddatz, I think, really put it all in context. NBC's Meet the Press was more about what's at stake and what are the consequences going to be for this denial strategy in the Alabama primary. And anyway, this is almost 4 minutes long. I will discuss it with you after we watch the NBC Meet the Press summary of how Donald Trump and Roy Moore and possibly the Republican Party are going to be in trouble because of the way they're embracing bad behavior. You can tell me what you think if that's true after we watch it together here.
To make too much of any one Senate race, but it's hard to overstate how much is at stake in Alabama on Tuesday. There's the Senate. A win by Doug Jones would give the Democrats 49 seats, and more importantly for them, a realistic chance of winning the majority in 2018. There's the president's agenda. Whether it's taxes or the budget or the courts, with one less vote, Senate Republicans will have an even harder time getting anything passed in that chamber. There's the sexual harassment issue. This election may tell us if categorically denying all accusations, no matter how credible, as Republican Roy Moore has done, is a successful strategy. And then there's the Republican Party itself. If Moore wins, will the GOP be happy to have his vote, or worry that the Democrats will hang Moore and his daily antics around the necks of Republican candidates throughout 2018? On Friday, I traveled to Mobile in deep red Alabama, which has voted for a Democratic presidential nominee exactly once since 1960. And what I found was widespread discomfort among voters in this conservative state, faced with choosing between a Democrat and a Republican accused of molesting underage girls.
Senate election, the candidates are hitting the campaign trail hard.
With 2 days to go in Alabama, politics is the only story.
Get out and vote
for Roy Moore.
60 miles from where President Trump campaigned for Roy Moore on Friday night, voters across the state line in Mobile are getting used to being the center of attention.
I have never seen as many yard signs for a Democrat in my life as in coastal Alabama.
There are a lot of Doug Jones signs around Fairhope. There are probably plenty of people voting for Roy Moore, but they just don't want to put a sign in their yard.
At a fundraiser for the Mobile Bay watershed on Friday night, I talked to some of the suburban women Jones hopes to win over. The multiple allegations against Moore of sexual misconduct with teenage girls aren't sitting well.
I mean, this is a terrible thing.
Campaign strategist Dean Young defends Moore.
Judge Moore did know some of the accusers. At least he said that at first, and now claims he didn't know any of the accusers.
Judge Moore knows people all over this country and all over Alabama. When you ask somebody, do you know this person?
So he doesn't remember people he dated?
No, well, again, it goes
I remember
back to
everybody I've dated.
Well, we know this. Judge Moore doesn't.
Do you remember everybody you dated?
No, I don't.
Many Alabama voters still don't know what to make of the allegations.
I need some kind of proof other than word of mouth that it happened.
Elaine Williams is a Class A welder at the Austell shipyards, which employs 4,000 workers, building combat ships for the U.S. Navy.
They said the same thing about Trump. He still made office.
For a lot of people, you know, that's a private matter that they just don't talk about it.
At Winsel's Oyster House on Dauphin Street, oysters come fried, stewed, and nude. And Mobile is the kind of place with moderate and African-American voters where Democrat Doug Jones needs to overperform.
Does Doug Jones have a message beyond being not Roy Moore?
He demonstrated courage in 2001, 2002, when he went back nearly 40 years and got people who had been involved in the killing of the murdering of those poor little black girls in Birmingham.
In order to distract from his issues, Moore's campaign continues to seize on this abortion answer from Jones when the general election began.
You wouldn't be in favor of legislation that said ban abortion after 20 weeks or something like that?
Now, I'm not in favor of anything that is going to infringe on a woman's right and her freedom to choose.
And Moore needs to turn out Trump voters like Flo Wiggum.
I think all it was a woman scored. They didn't get his attention, marry him, whatever.
What do you think's going to happen Tuesday?
I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen on Tuesday.
I think it's going to be really freaking close.
Joining me now is Republican Senator.
So that was a pretty good report from NBC's Meet the Press. I like the way they talked to the Alabama voters. Flo Wiggum, I didn't even know Chief Wiggum had a wife that I recalled. Oh, no, I guess, no, but whatever. And then, I don't know, I guess the real title of that clip should have been Fried, Stewed, and Nude in Alabama, maybe. But I mean, I thought it was a pretty good news summary, and it focused in on the Roy Moore topic, and but it didn't really focus in on the accusations. I don't know, maybe because it's been several weeks and most people have seen them, I guess. But I thought ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, with the permanent co-host or whatever, Martha Raddatz in charge this week, that her introduction really put it in context, put it in the context of the Time Silence Breakers cover and all of the accusers and Donald Trump, and I think focused really on the substance of the accusations and also the rest of the fallout in Congress. So this is the best news summary of the week. ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, hosted by Martha Raddatz this morning here.
For nearly 2 months of the Me Too tidal wave, Time magazine named the Silence Breakers, those voices that launched a movement, its Persons of the Year. And this week, the consequences of that movement finally came to Capitol Hill, now facing its own moment of reckoning. Congressman John Conyers, Representative Trent Franks, and Senator Al Franken all announcing their resignations this week over misconduct accusations. But as the Minnesota senator announced his departure Thursday, he took this parting shot.
There is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party.
Franken referring to sexual assault allegations against President Trump and to Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, accused of sexual misconduct with minors. But in spite of those allegations, Moore has kept up his campaign, and he now has the full support of the president heading into Tuesday's election. All this testing the Me Too movement and the soul of the Republican Party.
Let me state once again, I do not know any of these women, did not date any of these women, and have not engaged in any sexual misconduct with anyone.
Roy Moore accused of a range of inappropriate behaviors by 8 women, including Lee Korfman, who says Moore kissed her and touched her inappropriately when she was 14 and he was 32.
He touched me over my clothing, what was left of it, and he tried to get me to touch him as well.
And Beverly Young Nelson, with her own account of an alleged assault when she was 16.
Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me and putting his hands on my breasts. I tried to open my car door to leave, but he reached over and he locked it so I could not get out.
The GOP establishment quickly condemned Moore and pulled its support.
I believe the women, yes.
If he cares about the values and the people he claims to care about, then he should step aside.
But despite the allegations, Moore refused to leave the race.
I'll quit standing when they lay me in that box and put me in the ground.
And just 12 days after those reports first surfaced, a lifeline from the White House.
I can tell you one thing for sure. We don't need a liberal person in there, a Democrat, Jones.
Then a week ago, the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, also reopening the door.
Do you believe that Judge Moore should be in the Senate?
I'm going to let the people of Alabama make the call.
And by the middle of the week, Moore was back in the good graces of some Republicans, the RNC putting money behind Moore, and the president delivering a full endorsement of his candidacy.
How many people here are from the great state of Alabama? Whoa. So get out and vote for Roy Moore. Do it. Do it.
And just yesterday, we learned Moore's campaign is set to run a robocall voiced by the president, his firmest step yet into the race. If this all sounds familiar, it's because it is. Last year's Access Hollywood tape that revealed Trump bragging about groping women threatened to derail the Trump campaign weeks before the election. But after an initial outcry, the GOP kept Trump as its nominee, and he marched on to that historic Election Day upset. So will Roy Moore follow the Trump playbook to victory on Tuesday night?
On December 12th, you'll see an election that the world won't forget.
So if Moore pulls out the win, will that saddle the GOP with a senator under a cloud of controversy heading into 2018? Joining me now from Alabama.
And I'm actually going to have over 4.5 minutes of Martha Raddatz's cross-examination of that guest you saw at the end there, Dean Young, the campaign strategist for Roy Moore. And I think she pretty much tears him apart unless you are someone who already agrees with Roy Moore, and then maybe you're cheering him on. But his answers are just, I don't know, they're pretty disgusting. That'll be clip number 11 just before the end of this topic. It's the second to last clip in the topic, and that was definitely the best news summary. I like the way that Martha Raddatz started with the Time Me Too silence breakers issue and put it in the context of what's going on in Congress, and then went through the real substance of the accusations against Roy Moore, and then finished with the Trump playbook on how to deny it, and how, including the Access Hollywood tape. ABC included the Access Hollywood tape in their news summary, which we should be seeing that as often as possible, I think, since it seems to really be getting to Trump. He's almost gotten to the point where he's denying it's his voice on the tape. But I have 2 more news summaries before I get to the newsmaker clips. The next one is much shorter. It's about a minute long. It's the very beginning of CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper says it's sort of a double entendre. Our State of the Union is heading south, which it also means things are going bad, and it's going bad for Trump. And it has a few of the facts about Roy Moore. I mean, it's like I said, it's a much briefer summary, but it does talk about Trump endorsing someone who's credibly been accused of child molestation. So I have to give State of the Union credit for that, and I'll talk about it with you after we watch together here.
Dick Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is heading south. In just 2 days, voters will head to the polls in Alabama to choose a new U.S. Senator. President Trump is now throwing the full weight of his presidency behind controversial Republican candidate Roy Moore, who has been credibly accused of sexually abusing 2 young teenage girls, including a 14-year-old. Moore has repeatedly denied the allegations. And this morning, we're learning President Trump has recorded a robocall for Moore ahead of the election. On Friday, the president held a campaign-style rally just over the Alabama border, explicitly calling on voters to choose Moore.
We can't afford to have a liberal Democrat who is completely controlled by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We can't do it. Can't do it. So get out and vote for Roy Moore.
That endorsement from President Trump sure to offer Moore a boost in a state that Trump carried by nearly 30 points in 2016. Let's get right to Alabama's senior Republican.
So, yeah, I mean, it had sort of the basic facts, but certainly not anywhere as detailed and informative as either the ABC or even the NBC clip I showed before it. But I think that the Fox News clip I'm going to show next is, in some ways, I don't know if it's actively dishonest, but they're really trying to hide the Roy Moore accusations. I mean, you'll see Chris Wallace does mention it at the beginning and puts it in with Al Franken and John Conyers from, and even Trent Franks, the Republican, and then puts it over to Peter Doocy, and he like mentions the Roy Moore accusations in like this quick clause, right, and then sort of like hides them with this weird Beatles reference where like with a little help, he's getting help, he's going to make it with a little help from Trump and his friend, and I think his friend in this case is Steve Bannon. I don't know, it's a pretty awkward Beatles reference, which I will discuss with you after we watch that 2.5-minute Fox News Sunday clip summarizing the sexual harassment scandals and how it's affecting both Congress and the Alabama Senate race. And then you'll see Peter Doocy actually talks more about like the political factions, and I even like stresses the black politicians, the Democrats who are coming into Alabama, which I think may be trying to rile up the Republican base. I don't know. You can watch it with me and tell me if you think so after we watch it together here.
Fox News in Washington. The reckoning over allegations of sexual harassment came this week on Capitol Hill. Over the course of 3 days, the political careers of 3 lawmakers ended. On Tuesday, the retirement of the longest-serving member of Congress, John Conyers. And Thursday, the resignations of Senator Al Franken and Congressman Trent Franks. All this ahead of Tuesday's Senate contest in Alabama, where the Republican candidate, Judge Roy Moore, faces allegations of sexual misconduct with teenagers. In a few minutes, we'll talk with 2 leading congresswomen, Barbara Comstock and Debbie Dingell. But first, let's bring in Peter Doocy live in Birmingham, Alabama, with the latest on the special election. Peter.
Chris, the Senate candidate everybody has been talking about hasn't been seen in days. No events for Judge Roy Moore so far this weekend, but the Republican accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women is hoping to get by with a little help from President Trump and his friends. Election Eve in Alabama will feature a robocall from President Trump and a rally headlined by his former chief strategist, Steve Bannon. In a statement to Fox, the deputy campaign manager for the Moore campaign, Hannah Ford, says, quote, "Turnout is the key to victory, and we have pulled all hands on deck to activate Judge Moore's conservative and evangelical base. Our volunteers are on fire for the truth and are determined to stop pro-abortion, pro-taxes, pro-amnesty liberals from stealing their Senate seat." The Democrat Doug Jones is counting on heavy African-American turnout to flip the Senate seat Jeff Sessions held for 20 years and called in two potential 2020 contenders on Saturday, former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, to help him beat up Roy Moore with suggestions that he wouldn't represent every Alabamian who asks for help.
Taking constituent calls, not caring if they're black or they're white. Don't let me get in trouble now if they're gay or they're straight. It's about representing all of the people.
Something that's been overlooked lately, the write-in candidate. Many voters here still plan to write in their preferred Republican, even though nobody ever staged a formal write-in campaign, which means there are countless wild cards in this race. Chris?
Peter Doocy reporting from...
So, like I said before I showed the clip, both Chris Wallace and Peter Doocy did mention the allegations of sexual misconduct from several women against Roy Moore, but it was not really explained in detail like in the ABC clip I showed, or, I mean, like any of the other clips I showed. I think it was just briefly mentioned in just half a sentence by, or not even half a sentence by Peter Doocy, and just briefly by Chris Wallace. And I don't know about that Beatles reference. And what do you think after seeing that Cory Booker clip? Do you think like Fox News is showing that Cory Booker clip to like conservative Republicans in Alabama so that they get like offended that, you know, it seems like showing it to people who might think he's uppity, you know, that kind of thing. You tell me what you think. Was that the purpose of that Cory Booker clip, to rile up the Republican base? Is that some sort of like, I don't know. You let me know what you think down in the comment section. That's the last of the news summaries, but the next clip I'm going to show is also from Fox News Sunday, where I think they're desperately trying to make sure that this is not a partisan issue. They brought on a Democratic woman, Debbie Dingell from Michigan, a state that Donald Trump won, and then the Republican Barbara Comstock, who I've shown clips from a couple weeks ago. They're both fighting sexual harassment, but they're trying to do it in a bipartisan way, which sort of undermines this Democratic argument that, you know, that they're taking the moral high ground. They're getting rid of Al Franken and John Conyers, and the Republicans are sticking by Donald Trump and Roy Moore. And you can see in the way that since Fox News Sunday and Chris Wallace decided to put the Democrat and the Republican together, it makes them more likely to say, oh, this is not a partisan issue, because you know, they're right in front of each other. They're trying to be bipartisan, and like I said, undermines the moral high ground, which I will talk about with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Congresswoman Dingell, Democrats move fast this week to push both John Conyers, your fellow congressman from Michigan, and Al Franken, senator from Minnesota, to step down. And there are signs that your party is trying to seize the moral high ground on this issue. Take a look.
Where is their outrage? In fact, on the opposite end, they're coming forward to support Roy Moore. How's that for totally inappropriate positions?
Is there a difference in how the two parties are handling this issue of sexual harassment and among members of Congress, and is that a legitimate issue in the 2018 campaign?
I think that the voters are going to hold everybody accountable, whether you're Republican or Democrat, when the 2018 campaign happens. This has probably been was the most difficult week of my career. When you look at somebody like John Conyers, who had the legacy that he did, have to step aside. But this has been going on for a very long time, Chris. We know what our values are. I don't consider this a partisan issue. I find it, I mean, Barbara and I totally agree on this issue. I've also called that I think Congressman Farenthold should resign. $84,000 is a lot of money, and it wasn't for nothing. We cannot have a double standard. And we still have somebody running for office. We still have somebody in the White House that has acknowledged that they have done things that are not okay, or at least the president has. So it's disturbing. But we have to know who we are, and I think we're all going to be held accountable, next Republican or Democrat, next November.
But do you see a difference in the president and Roy Moore on the one hand, and pushing out Conyers and Franken on the other, and Democratic leaders demanding that they leave?
I think that everybody's got to be accountable. So I think those that aren't making, I mean, there are, as you've seen, sitting at this table, Republicans are calling for this man to step down, and Republicans have even criticized the president for what he did. I think we know what our values are. I think we know what we stand for, and I think the American people are going to hold people accountable next November.
It's been clear from the past month, these issues aren't partisan. They've been in the media, they've been in entertainment, and that's why we took a look in Congress. I'm on the Committee of Jurisdiction. We were looking at this issue even before some of these stories came forward, because we knew if we were seeing what we saw in media, in the entertainment industry, and across all industries, that it was going to be in Congress too. And that's why we're going to change the procedures. We've already passed resolution, my bill on having mandatory training. And we know there's a lot more that we need to do both in Congress as well as with the public at large. So I think it's important, as Debbie said, that this not be seen as partisan, because it's a watershed moment where men and women are coming together across the partisan divide to change the culture here. And that's why you're seeing people leaving, Democrat and Republican. There's still some Democrats and Republicans there who have been asked to leave, who haven't left yet, but this is still going to be playing out. But let's focus too on the women and their stories, because we need to see what their stories are and how we can make them whole. And that's the real problem here, is that women have been denied their careers because of these men in power, and it's a power abuse, not really about sex so much as power abuse.
Talk about that. We'll talk about reforms in a moment, but let's.
So when I introduced the clip, I already explained my analysis of how Fox News is trying to downplay the moral high ground that Democrats are taking. And I mean, there are two different ways you could take the partisan argument. I mean, it's definitely true that sexual harassment is not a partisan issue and that only Republicans are sexual harassers. There are sexual harassers in, men in power, especially men, sometimes women, but it's mainly men in power relationships, and it's not just in Congress. It's throughout different industries and businesses, and so to that extent, I do agree it's not a partisan issue, but how the different parties are reacting to sexual harassment, that does seem to be becoming a partisan issue, and I don't think it's fair to undermine that. In fact, some have said that maybe Democrats are going too far to try to distinguish themselves from Republicans. In fact, some Republicans are saying that. This next clip is the Senator Bernie Sanders clip from NBC's Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd plays a clip of Newt Gingrich claiming that Democrats have become a lynch mob. And you'll see Bernie Sanders' response. This is about Al Franken's resignation, which I'll give my opinion on after I show the clip and we watch it together. Bernie Sanders basically says that, it was his decision. He wasn't really forced out. And that's true, technically, but not completely, as I will also explain after we watch this 2.5-minute Bernie Sanders answer to a couple questions from Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
I want to move on to what happened to one of your colleagues this week when Al Franken decided to resign. I want to play for you something that was sort of a common refrain among quite a few conservatives. Here's Newt Gingrich.
And what you saw today was a lynch mob. Look, let's not have due process. Let's not ask anybody any questions. Let's not have any chance to have a hearing. Let's just lynch him.
Al Franken wanted the Ethics Committee to take a look first before he made any decisions. Bob Menendez is in the midst of an Ethics Committee probe. Why should Bob Menendez be given time in front of the Ethics Committee before you guys as Democrats decide his fate versus Al Franken?
Well, Bob Menendez, as you know, underwent a lengthy trial. There was a hung jury. He was not convicted of anything. I think
he could be retried. He may be retried, for what it's worth.
Well, he may be, but that's where we are today. I think in terms of Al Franken, what you have, and Al Franken is a friend of mine and I think has been a very good senator for Minnesota. But what you have is a situation where Senator Franken acknowledged wrongdoing on several occasions, inappropriate misbehavior, and he felt that the appropriate thing to do was to offer his resignation. I think what the absurdity is...
He didn't think, I'll be honest with you, Senator, he didn't sound like somebody who thought it was appropriate. He sounded like somebody who was being forced to resign. He wasn't being forced.
Well, I don't know that you know what was in Al Franken's mind, but the point is that we have the absurdity now of a president of the United States who basically says on a tape that everybody in this country has seen his pride, in a sense, in assaulting women. And he has not apologized for that, and he has, not offered his resignation. So I think that's the absurdity. But I think in terms of what Gingrich was saying, there needs to be a due process. There needs to be a differentiation between somebody who pats somebody on the backside and somebody who commits terrible acts against women. And furthermore, what we need in this country, and this whole discussion is bringing this up, we need a cultural revolution. Because it's not just famous people who are harassing women. There are people all over this country, women who are working in restaurants, who are being harassed every single day. We need to change the culture of how we treat women on the job.
I want to ask you about the issue of...
So the next question there you heard Jake Tapper starting was on impeachment, and as usual you can watch the full State of the Union program and the source of all my clips at links I put down in the video description. I mean, I think Bernie Sanders was correct there that there should be nuances, and zero tolerance is never really a good idea when you're talking about things that range from just slight offenses to things like rape have been alleged in some of these cases, and so they like patting someone on the backside by mistake when you're taking a picture, which that may or may not be what happened with Al Franken. He hasn't completely given his statement of what he thinks happened, but there are women saying that he grabbed their butts while they were taking photos with him. There's also a woman saying that he forced a kiss on her when she didn't want it, and I mean, that can be a battery. That can even be a sexual battery here in California, based on my criminal law experience. Depending on whether it's done for the purpose of sexual gratification or sexual abuse, or it's just an unwanted touching, which is what battery is. Simple misdemeanor battery is a touching someone without their permission in a way that is harmful or offensive. So it could at least be that, but that's a fairly minor offense. I mean, it's still a misdemeanor, but I don't know if it should get you kicked out of the Senate. I guess... Did Al Franken really resign of his own accord when about, was it 30-something senators came out and on the Democratic side and told him to resign? But I think it was part of this idea of the Democrats taking the moral high ground, which is what John Dickerson over on CBS's Face the Nation asked the second-ranking Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin, about. And he tried to say that Democrats were taking the moral high ground while at the same time saying it wasn't a partisan issue, which is kind of a mixed message, which I will discuss with you after we watch that 95-second Face the Nation clip over here.
About a political critique of the Democratic Party's pressure on Al Franken that led to his resignation. Dahlia Lithwick writes in Slate a piece that says, morality is no longer its own reward. What we get in exchange for being good and morally right is now nothing. The argument that the Democrats have a standard that leads Franken to go, and the Republicans the Republican committee supporting more, the president's supporting more, and that essentially Democrats are on the high road, but it's a politically bad road to be on.
I can just tell you, your interview with Susan Collins demonstrates that's not true. There are Republicans who feel very strongly about this issue and have said so. And I think if more do, then we can establish a national standard, not a partisan standard, when it comes to the future of relationships with women. This, to me, from Susan Collins' comments, gives me hope that the Alabama voters will do the right thing, and we'll also see both parties coming to the same conclusion on this issue.
A final question on this, Senator. There's a criticism that that Al Franken was pressured not just because of the specific facts of the case, but Democrats wanted to look good in comparison to Republicans. What's your response?
I can tell you it was a painful process because of our personal friendships and relationships with Al and his family. There was no political calculation in here. It was just a painful moment when we made a decision, moved forward, and the Democratic side. I hope the Republicans will face that reality as well.
On taxes, Senator, what can
So do you believe that there was no political calculation in the Democrats all coming together and pushing out Al Franken, or at least really pressuring him strongly to get out before the election in 2 days, on Tuesday, December 12th in Alabama, where an accused child molester is about to be elected, probably as a Republican, to the United States Senate? And the biggest Republican talking point in response is, what about Al Franken? So the Democrats got rid of Al Franken, I think, for that very political reason. Dick Durbin there, he's like full of it. That is a totally dishonest answer, in my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. Now, I've shown you a couple Democrats, Dick Durbin Dick Durbin is Democrat. Bernie Sanders, as I called him a Democrat a couple weeks ago, and many commentators, well, at least one commentator pointed out, he's not a Democrat. He's an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, but he is a progressive, and so those two clips are on the Democrat progressive side. The next two clips come from Republicans. The first one is from the other senator from Alabama, Richard Shelby, who I think is trying to do like pull a fast one here, where he's not going to vote for Roy Moore. He's voting for a write-in candidate, but he won't tell us who, which is kind of bogus, because the only way a write-in candidate is going to be successful is if you like publicize, get like a big campaign telling people you got to write in this guy's name. If it's like a secret, that's really stupid. And that is my one criticism of Jake Tapper's questioning, is that he like follows up at the end, who were you writing in? And Richard Shelby won't say who. And he doesn't point out, well, that's really stupid if you actually want that person to win. But the rest of this is pretty good. It's about 2 minutes long. I'll talk about it with you after we watch together here.
Yes, we appreciate it. You said that you already cast your ballot in the Alabama special election and that you chose to write in a candidate instead of voting for the Republican Roy Moore. The latest polls are neck and neck, showing Jones, the Democrat, leading by a hair. Perhaps when it comes down to it on Tuesday, who would you rather see win?
Well, I'd rather see the Republican win, but I hope that Republican would be a write-in. I couldn't vote for Roy Moore. I didn't vote for Roy Moore, but I wrote in a distinguished Republican name, and I think a lot of people could do that. Will they do it? I'm not sure. I don't know what's going to happen. As a Republican, I had to vote Republican. I wanted to vote Republican. I understand where the president's coming from. I understand we would like to retain that seat in the U.S. Senate. But I tell you what, there's a time, we call it a tipping point. And I think so many accusations, so many cuts, so many drip, drip, drip. When it got to the 14-year-old story, that was enough for me. I said, I can't vote for Roy Moore.
But you're going to wake up on Wednesday, and one of these two men, Roy Moore or Doug Jones, is going to be your fellow senator from Alabama. Which one would you rather deal with on a professional level?
Well, I don't have to answer that question today. I had rather see another Republican in there, and I'm going to stay with that story. I'm not going to vote for the Democrat. I didn't vote for the Democrat or advocate for the Democrat, but I couldn't vote for Roy Moore. The state of Alabama deserves better. I think we've got a lot of great Republicans that could have won and carried the state beautifully and served in the Senate honorably.
Will you tell us who you voted for, who you wrote in?
I am not going to tell you that any more than you do, okay?
Well, let me ask you, Roy Moore.
Just a little chuckle there from Jake Tapper, pointing out that if you're going to actually support a write-in candidate, the only way that person's possibly going to win is if you publicize it and get other people to also vote for that write-in candidate, which I think makes it clear why Richard Shelby was saying he's sticking to his story, because his story is, I vote Republican, but I don't vote Roy Moore, and the only way to do that is to have some secret write-in vote. But so that whole, it's not really, Richard Shelby doesn't really strike me as profiling courage there in his non-support of Roy Moore, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I have one more Republican to show here, and this is the one I promised earlier after I showed the Martha Raddatz summary. This is Martha Raddatz's heavy cross-examination of Senate candidate Roy Moore's political strategist, Dean Young, talking about, he won't call any of the accusers liars, but he's saying they're the ones not telling the truth. And he keeps bringing up this whole yearbook controversy where Gloria Allred's client showed a yearbook entry written by Roy Moore from when she was 16 years old, when she worked at this restaurant, and you saw that in the ABC News clip earlier. And she claims that he attacked her, bruised her neck, and the thing is, she wrote like the date and the place and the fact that he was a DA in her yearbook, and just disclosed that. Never said it was written by Roy Moore earlier, but that's been like this huge talking point now for Roy Moore supporters. That and some news outlets were actually saying that she admitted she forged part of the entry, which it's not. If she never claimed it was written by Roy Moore, which she never did, that's not forgery. Forgery is a fraud. There's no fraud here, but that's not what you would believe if you believe what Dean Young is saying, as he gets heavily cross-examined by Martha Raddatz. This is the second to last clip. There's going to be a polling clip, the NBC Meet the Press data download clip, about how this whole thing may be losing Republicans' women in the long run. I mean women voters, not losing their women, but here's that Dean Young cross-examination from Martha Raddatz first that I will discuss with you after we watch together here.
You've said of the accusations against Judge Moore, I've known him and he's never, ever said anything derogatory or sexual toward any person, man, woman, ever. The kind of behavior he's accused of would not likely be in front of you or anyone else, would it?
Well, what he's been accused of is falling apart. On Friday on one of your shows, the lady that Gloria Allred's client was trotted out there again to tell the world that, hey, I was misleading all of y'all. So it needs to be clear to the people of America, and especially the people of Alabama, that their stories are falling apart. That she told you one thing weeks ago, and now, right Friday, 2 days ago, she's coming out with Gloria Allred and the Gloria Allred circus and saying, well, Judge Moore didn't write all this. I'm sorry about that.
Well,
so the people of
let's
Alabama
talk
need
about
to know
that specifically, Mr. Young. You're talking about Beverly Young Nelson, who alleges Moore groped her and bruised her neck in the late 1970s when she was 16 years old. And as evidence of knowing him, she has been showing an inscription Moore made in her high school yearbook before the alleged assault. It reads, "To a sweeter, more beautiful girl, I could not say Merry Christmas. Christmas 1977, love Roy Moore." And Miss Nelson now says that she put in DA after that 122277 Old Hickory House, the restaurant where she says they were. She has acknowledged that she wrote that in there. But does that mean the rest of it is a forgery?
Well, let's just put it this way. Somebody's not telling the truth, and it's not Judge Moore. Everybody in Alabama has known Judge Moore's been telling the truth the whole time, and this is absolute proof that this woman went on TV, national TV, with Gloria Allred, of all people, somebody from California trying to influence the elections in Alabama, went on TV and told the whole world that Judge Moore wrote all of that. And now she's coming back 3 days before the election and saying, I'm wrong. He didn't write all of that. So somebody's not telling the truth, and it's not Judge Moore. We believe Judge Moore has been telling the truth the entire time, and this is just evidence that he's been telling the truth.
So where do you think this story came from? This original Washington Post story, you have 8 people talking about some sort of inappropriate behavior or flat-out assault. Do you think these women all just made it up? The women in the Washington Post story didn't even know each other.
Well, that's a good question, and the people of Alabama want to know why 30 days before an election that people would just come out of the woodwork and saying Judge Moore did this and Judge Moore did that. I'm not sure why they did it. I don't believe them, and the people of Alabama don't believe them. But I guess, one of them was in Time magazine. One of them was on your show on Friday. In this world where everybody wants to be on TV, You know, maybe that's the reason. I'm not sure why.
Well, let me tell you, the most
Judge
serious
Moore,
allegation is Lee Korfman. She claims Moore sexually assaulted her when she was 14 years old. She responded to Judge Moore's denial with this open letter. What you did to me when I was 14 years old should be revolting to every person of good morals. But now you're attacking my honesty and integrity. Where does your immorality end? Your smears and false denials and those of others who repeat and embellish them are defamatory and damaging to me and my family. I am telling the truth, and you should have the decency to admit it and apologize. So you are calling Lee Korfman a liar?
I'm saying Lee Korfman's not telling the truth. And what I'm saying is this, just like you just quoted her and said, we got to believe her because she said it, because she wrote it. That's what y'all said about the lady on Friday. Y'all said just because she said it. And by the way, she's got this piece of paper that she says Judge Moore wrote on in her yearbook. Y'all got to believe them. You got to believe them. Zero evidence. And this fake narrative about Judge Moore that the people of Alabama have been putting up with for 3 or 4 weeks is falling apart in front of y'all's eyes. And he will be the next senator from Alabama, and he will go up and help Trump. And this Democrat he's fighting is this Democrat's for asking Trump to resign. So the people of Alabama need to understand who they're dealing with.
I just want to say that your book, they have said that is evidence, and 30 other people backed up those 8 women in the Washington Post story. I want to ask you finally, if Judge Moore were to win the Senate.
So, like I said, I thought that was a great job by Martha Raddatz, and the answers from that guy Dean Young are pretty disgusting. I don't know. Definitely victim blaming and smearing, and it's just that I think is going to eventually hurt the Republican Party. And I'm actually a big fan of Dahlia Lithwick, who John Dickerson quoted in his question earlier to Dick Durbin about whether Democrats were taking the moral high ground that isn't going to get them anything because Republicans are going to say, okay, you can get rid of your people and we're going to keep our people because they admitted their wrongdoing, and our people are denying everything like Donald Trump and Roy Moore, and so we're going to keep them. And you're going to lose members and we're going to be at full strength. But, you know, that might work in the short term in terms of losing Franken in the Senate, although he's going to be replaced by the governor of Minnesota by another Democrat. And maybe Roy Moore will win. But in the long run, I think it's actually the moral high ground strategy is going to work if Democrats stick to their principles, and even when it's their friends who commit wrongdoing, that they, you know, I'm not saying the zero tolerance policy, because I think you can have gradations of punishment from, you know, minor offenses to, you know, child molestation and rape on the high end, and there should be some due process. So, you know, I mentioned that before with the Al Franken case. But I think if Democrats have real principles and standards and Republicans don't, that's going to lose them voters. And as evidence, I show this final clip in the Bad Boy Backlash Continued category, the Donald Trump, Roy Moore trouble category, I guess you could call it. This is the data download segment from NBC's Meet the Press, quoting the Gallup tracking poll. As far as I can tell, I tried to research this because it basically shows that even though Donald Trump is still popular with the Republicans, there are fewer and fewer Republicans. Fewer people are identifying as Republican. Republicans have lost about 5 points, while Democrats have stayed steady. And I checked out, if this is the Gallup tracking poll, which I think it is, the margin of errors, they actually poll like 14,000 people, so the margin of error is only plus or minus 1%, so 5% is really significant. And as you'll see Chuck Todd explain, it includes losing significant numbers of women from identifying as a Republican, which is very understandable, I think, and I will discuss it with you after we watch this final clip in this topic over here.
Since Donald Trump won the presidency and became leader of the Republican Party. And while President Trump's approval rating in that time has slumped, a lot has been made of his continued strength among Republican voters. But there is evidence that fewer people are actually calling themselves Republicans today than they did a year ago, which means that the president is holding on to a large share of a shrinking pie. According to Gallup, the percentage of people who now identify as Republicans has dropped 5 points since last November, 42% to 37%, while Democrats have remained flat at 44%. And Republicans have seen drops across nearly every demographic group. Let's start with age. Across 3 different age brackets, Republicans are down 4 or 5 points. The party is down 4 points among those with a college degree and 5 points among those without a college degree. But who is really driving the decline in people identifying as Republicans? It's women, particularly white women. Republicans are now down 5 points among all women, but more significantly, it's down 7 points among white women. In fact, last November, white women identified more as Republican than Democrat, 48-43. This November, those numbers are essentially reversed. 41% say they are Republicans, while 46% of white women now call themselves Democrats. So, why do these numbers matter? Well, consider this. In the November Virginia governor's race, Republicans dropped 2 points in their party ID, and Democrats gained 4 from the 2013 election. The result? A race that was supposed to be a nail-biter turned into a rout for the Democrat. That happened in Virginia, and it doesn't stay in Virginia. The wave elections Democrats are hoping for across the country next year could actually happen. When we come back...
That wave election could actually happen. Wave, wave, wave. That wave election could be precipitated by this kind of misconduct. That's what happened back in 2000. You remember the last time the Democrats took over the Congress in 2006, there was a lot of Republican misconduct back then as well. Sexual misconduct. Not Dennis Hastert. His misconduct came later, but there were several Republicans who got in trouble, and the Republicans helped the Republican misconduct helped create the wave that took Democrats into taking over Congress in 2006. So it could happen again. That's pretty hopeful polling data from Gallup there, and you know that's where Republicans should be worried about the loss of women through their moral low ground on the sexual harassment issue, and especially Republicans should be asking themselves, to quote Cleavon Little and Blazing Saddles, where are the white women at? Where are the white women at? Republicans need to ask themselves that. So anyway, that's the last clip on the bad boy behavior backlash, more trouble, M-O-O-R-E, more trouble topic that is the major topic of the Sunday News Analysis shows this morning. For the fans out there, I do have a Sandy clip. I took a quick 8-second video of Sandy settling in for the show. And so in between the two topics here, I'll show the quick Sandy clip for the Sandy fans out there. So once again, Sandy settling in front of my American constitutional law textbook that I inexplicably have sitting on the floor over there. I guess maybe one of these days I might go over and grab it and use it during the show as I try to commit a legal analysis for my viewers. And I also noticed, speaking of my fans, that I had like 4 Super Chat contributions already during the show from the live viewers. You can only give Super Chat contributions during the live show, so I appreciate that. It helps make up for the demonetization that basically happens every week for at least 24 hours of the first 48 hours my video is up. Even the video I uploaded this week, like 1 minute and 11 seconds of Sandy listening to Senator Al Franken's resignation, that got demonetized for like 24 hours, although it's monetized again. But here are the 4 Super Chat contributions so far. So you can see all those comments there. This is a new shirt, so I appreciate that first comment there from Kevin Barry, the $5 for the shirt, and Sexy Bob, of course, I always appreciate your input. And then EA96B, it's true that the Republicans who oppose Trump are not our friends, but they're at least our friends on that one issue. I mean, I think that getting rid of Trump is such an important issue that we have to cultivate the anti-Trump Republicans to achieve that purpose. But I definitely agree with what EA96B said there. So thank you for those Super Chat contributions. They definitely help make up for the loss of ad revenue. I also am supported by my Patreon patrons. I've lost a few this week because of especially the people who give the smaller contributions are getting a worse deal from Patreon in terms of the fees, which they've said is better for the creators, but I don't know. I apologize to my Patreon patrons who are not happy with that. I obviously have nothing to do with that, but I do appreciate the Patreon patrons, and I'm even going to be setting up some new reward levels by the end of this month that I've talked about earlier, especially for the larger levels, which I guess are not as affected by these new flat rate fees on Patreon. But anyway, I appreciate all the support I get from the Super Chat contributions, the Patreon patrons, and even people who show for the live show and the recorded show, post supportive comments. Give me a thumbs up down there, so I appreciate that. And so now I will get to my final topic here, which will include, like I said, some I will be committing legal analysis, at least for the last clip where I talk about attorney-client privilege. But this is the Russia scandal continuing, the Donald Trump Jr. testimony and his weird attorney-client privilege claim I will get to in the last couple clips. But the first clip I want to show, I like to show political comedy, I guess. This is the way Fox News Sunday and Fox News in general has been covering the Russia scandal. It's more about the scandal that there is a scandal, or like the FBI bias against the Trump administration, which is kind of weird for reasons I'll discuss after I show the clip. This is 3 parts of 3 different clips edited together. First, like the the first introductory clip before Chris Wallace even comes in. It's like their preview of what they're going to talk about in terms of Russia, and you'll see it's all spun towards the bias of Mueller. And then the introduction, you'll see a teaser clip from Chris Wallace before the panel discussion, because of course they only really dealt with it in the panel discussion. And then I'll actually show the part of the panel discussion with Chris Wallace's introduction, and then this right-wing guy, Michael Needham, talking about it. And it's like this bizarro, alternate upside-down world where the real problem is the bias of the FBI and Mueller and going after our hero, Donald Trump, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Plus, Republicans hammer Robert Mueller and the FBI as the Russia investigation closes in on the Trump inner circle. We'll ask our Sunday panel about GOP charges our top law enforcement agencies are pursuing a political agenda. Next, we'll bring back the panel to discuss the troubled state of Robert Mueller's Russia probe. Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about GOP allegations of bias in the investigation? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.
It is absolutely unacceptable for FBI employees to permit their own political predilections to contaminate any investigation.
There is no finer institution than the FBI, and no finer people than the men and women who work there and are its very beating heart.
The chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte, questioning the impartiality of the FBI, while new director Christopher Wray defended his agency. And we're back now with the panel. Well, there were several allegations this week about Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe. First, that lead agent, FBI agent Peter Strzok, was taken off the case in July after Mueller learned he was sending anti-Trump messages to a colleague. Second, that top Justice Department official Bruce Ohr had undisclosed meetings with 2 people involved with the so-called Russia dossier. Michael, how seriously does this compromise the Mueller investigation?
Well, I think it certainly raises issues that need to be addressed. I mean, the entire purpose of the Mueller investigation, the reason many of us embraced it, was that the American people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to have a quick and thorough investigation so that we can move on from these innuendos and claims of things that have gone on. Now you look at this, the very best thing that can be said about Peter Strzok is he's completely unprofessional. For somebody in that role to be sending anti-Trump, pro-Hillary tweets. The FBI refuses, the Justice Department refuses to talk about what role did this Russian dossier that now we find out a top Justice Department official was involved in talking with the person who put it together. What role did that play in getting a FISA warrant to be able to investigate members of the Trump campaign? You have investigators on Mueller's team who've spent over $60,000 supporting Hillary Clinton and Democrats, defending the Clinton Foundation, defending Ben Rhodes, Barack Obama's national security advisor.
That was all before.
All before that. All of these are things that cause anybody who looks at this situation to say, is it possible for this team to put forward a fair investigation? I think Bob Mueller needs to come forward and regain the trust of the American people, give us confidence that this is all just coincidence and that there can be a fair investigation.
Rachel, clearly, as Michael lays them out, there are some legitimate issues and questions here. On the other hand, do you believe, from your reporting, that there is a concerted effort by Republicans both in the White House and in the Senate and House to discredit the Mueller investigation as it begins to get closer to the Trump inner circle?
Yeah, at least Chris Wallace included that last part where it's pretty obvious this is a way to try to undermine the Mueller investigation because they're getting closer and closer to Donald Trump and his inner circle there. So that is not quite a saving grace for the rest of what you saw there, though, especially because did you see Michael Needham, the right-wing guy there, say that this biased FBI agent sent anti-Trump tweets? He said tweets, and nobody corrected him. They're actually anti-Trump texts to his girlfriend, which I'm sorry, I guess we'll have to wait and see what the texts say, but FBI agents are people and are allowed to have political opinions that they express to their girlfriends through texting. That is not the same as like tweeting them out publicly, or I mean, it depends, I suppose, on what the texts say. If they say that, you know, I hate Donald Trump so much I would do anything to get him, and I love Hillary Clinton so much that I would do anything to save her from criminal prosecution or whatever. But somehow I don't think that's what the texts say. Maybe they say like this Donald Trump guy would be disastrous for America, or he's like crazy. This guy's crazy and awful and disgusting. That is not a non-mainstream political opinion in my mind. So it depends on what the texts say. FBI agents are allowed to have political opinions that they express to their girlfriends. In my opinion, there's no law against that unless they allow their bias to creep into their investigations. But the whole idea that the FBI was biased for Trump and against Hillary Clinton, well, that might fly if this were the first edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, but this is the 242nd week in a row that I've done this show, and if you've been watching for at least more, the last 14 months, you'll remember back in October, November of 2016 when the FBI totally screwed Hillary Clinton by, 10 days before the election, coming out and saying, oh, we're reopening your email investigation, and then closing it up again right before the election. But that really fed into Donald Trump and the Russian leaked email hacked emails from the DNC that all worked together to depress Hillary Clinton's numbers at the end, I guess. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can listen to Adam Schiff, the ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee. Did I call him a Republican? Sorry. Ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. And he's talking to Jake Tapper. I'm going to show two clips from him. They're actually in reverse order. This is the second clip chronologically, but it relates to that Fox News Sunday Mueller bias montage I just showed. And here's basically Adam Schiff refuting that. when Jake Tapper says, well, wouldn't Democrats be worried if the shoe were on the other foot? And Adam Schiff says, well, the shoe was on the other foot over in this clip.
I ask you about Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. He removed an FBI agent over the summer from his team after text messages that this agent sent reportedly revealed an anti-Trump bias. Another top member of Mueller's team's investigators, Andrew Weissman, sent an email to Sally Yates, then the acting attorney general, congratulating her for refusing to enforce the Trump travel ban. And according to the Wall Street Journal, Weissman also attended Hillary Clinton's election night party in New York. Can you understand, if the situations were reversed, why Republicans would look at these facts and say, boy, there might really be a problem with bias in the Mueller investigation?
You know, Jake, the fact is the circumstances have been reversed in probably a far more significant way, and that is we now know that at the same time that James Comey was openly talking about a Hillary Clinton investigation, including up until days before the election, he was not disclosing to the public that there was also an investigation of the Trump campaign. That is far more significant than any of these text messages from my point of view. Now, I don't think that was because James Comey had a political axe to grind or was doing this in a partisan way. I do think it was an error in judgment. And I think it is perfectly appropriate for us to do oversight of how that investigation was conducted. But the intent here is not to do oversight. The intent here is nothing short of discrediting Mueller, then discrediting the Justice Department, then discrediting the FBI, then discrediting the judiciary. Should the judiciary convict some of the people that Mueller has charged or may charge in the future. This is an effort to tear at the very idea that there is an objective truth. And I think this president, in astonishing speed, has remade the Republican Party in his own deeply flawed image. And that will be ruinous to the Republican Party. But as we depend on a two-party system with two functional parties, it will also be deeply damaging to the country. The discrediting of our institutions, the justice system, the judiciary, the press, is enormously destructive.
Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. If I don't see you before Tuesday, happy Hanukkah and happy New Year to you, sir.
And to you as well.
President Obama has a stark warning for America.
So, like I said, I definitely agree with Adam Schiff's analysis. I don't know if maybe it might have been better for the white supremacist Jews will not replace us crowd who believe in some big conspiracy if the Jewish Jake Tapper and the Jewish Adam Schiff did not wish each other happy Hanukkah at the end of that anti-conspiracy clip. But you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I have another Adam Schiff clip that I saw. Adam Schiff, if you look at Adam Schiff's Twitter feed, which I follow, he tweeted this clip and he put above it the case he's made for collusion. Basically, it's that Russia offered help, the Trump campaign accepted the help, Russia gave the Trump campaign help, and Trump used that help to the greatest extent possible he could. So those are like the four elements that point very strongly to the case, toward the case of collusion, which is what Adam Schiff is answering to Jake Tapper's question. You know, what, you know, where is the connection? Where is the collusion? Which is what Republicans keep asking in this Russia scandal. And Adam Schiff had a great answer, I think, as I will discuss with you after we watch it together here.
This week about the Russia investigation, quote, "You really have to be trying to look away to say there's no evidence of collusion here." Now, as far as the public knows, we've seen evidence of Russian hacking, according to the intelligence community. We've seen the Russians dangling these emails, these damaging emails, before contacts with the Trump team or members of the Trump team. And we've seen members of the Trump team expressing willingness to get dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russians. But we haven't seen the actual connection. We haven't seen an actual proof of cooperation and collusion. So what am I missing here?
Well, you know, I think you have to look at the pattern and the chronology. You have in late April the Russians approaching the Trump campaign and saying, we have stolen Hillary Clinton emails. You have only weeks later the Russians making another approach to the campaign, this time at the highest levels, offering dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
The campaign already on notice that they have emails. You then have the message going back from the campaign to the Russians, basically, we would love to have your help, we'd love to play ball, but we are really disappointed in what you gave us. And only days later, Julian Assange announces he's received stolen emails, which we know now came from the Russians, and the Russians themselves start publishing the emails through these cutouts. You then have Trump Jr. in private secret communication with WikiLeaks. So we have all of these facts in chronology. You'd have to believe that these were all isolated incidents not connected to each other. Just doesn't make rational sense. Now, can you prove beyond a reasonable doubt, will be Mueller's question to answer, that the Russians communicated to the campaign that the way they were going to deliver the help they offered and that the campaign accepted was not by handing the emails directly over to the campaign, but by publishing them. That will be up to Mueller, and we continue to try to fill in all of the missing pieces. But we do know this. The Russians offered help, the campaign accepted help. The Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help. And that is pretty damning, whether it is proof beyond a reasonable doubt of conspiracy or not.
Do you know of any instance where the Russians said, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it through WikiLeaks, we're going to do it through DC Leaks, this is how we're going to get this information out there?
I can't comment. That is an issue that we have been investigating, and I don't want to comment at this point or not what the state of that evidence is.
I want to ask you about special counsel.
So that was a pretty awesome argument from Representative Adam Schiff from California, who has been kind of a star of this whole Russia-Trump investigation as the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, laying out all the factors that point strongly towards the Trump-Russia collusion theory, and we're waiting for the special counsel Robert Mueller to fill in the blanks there, but it sounds like they're well on their way, and I wouldn't be surprised, but if that comes out even sometime in the next few months. But before I finish the show, the final clip I promised you at the beginning when I made that joke about how if you're with an attorney in your chat room, then everything you say must be subject to attorney-client privilege. Well, apparently Donald Trump Jr., when he testified privately to, I think it was the House Judiciary, not House Intelligence. I could be wrong. That we'll find out in this next clip. One of the Democrats on that committee was Representative Jim Hines, and he talked to Chuck Todd this morning, and he basically affirmed that Donald Trump Jr. made this bogus attorney-client privilege argument when asked about the discussions he had with his father, the president, Donald Trump, when it came out that Donald Trump Jr. had this meeting in June 2016 with this Russian lawyer and these other nefarious characters about getting dirt on Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump was flying back to the U.S. on Air Force One and created this really misleading statement for Donald Trump Jr. to put out, and so that was what he used this bogus privilege to not discuss when he was before the committee. It isn't clear at the Chuck Todd's questioning doesn't really make that clear till the end that that's where the privilege was used, and neither Chuck Todd nor Jim Hines really seem to understand how it is that the committee can then compel the testimony by saying the privilege is bogus, but I'll discuss that after we watch this final almost 4-minute clip from Meet the Press Together over here.
Shortage of news on the Russia investigation this week. President Trump's allies in Congress and on Fox News stepped up an effort to undermine independent counsel Robert Mueller, his investigation, and the credibility of the FBI. There was more evidence that WikiLeaks was at least playing favorites with the Trump campaign when it came to what they had in their servers. And in a closed-door hearing at the House Intelligence Committee, Donald Trump Jr. tried to claim attorney-client privilege to avoid describing his conversations with President Trump about his, Jr.'s, conversations last year with a Russian lawyer. By the way, neither Donald Trump Sr. or Jr. is a lawyer. It's quite a lot to unpack. So joining me now is a member of the House Intelligence Committee who actually had a chance to question Donald Trump Jr. It's Democratic Congressman Jim Hines of Connecticut. Congressman, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thanks, Chuck.
Let me just start with, it was some 7 or 8 hours. Just characterize, would you characterize Donald Trump Jr. as forthcoming? You called him largely cooperative. Would you describe him that he was forthcoming?
Yeah, I would. I mean, he spent a lot of time in front of the committee. He answered questions. There was the one episode, which has been talked about since that interview, where he declined, and you made reference to it, he declined to answer a question about a conversation that he'd had with his father that may be relevant to the Don Jr. meeting at Trump Tower. Apart from that, I would say he was forthcoming.
When did he invoke this this privilege? Was it a conversation that he had with his father in that right after the meeting itself, or was it about a conversation he may have had with his father about trying to spin the disclosure of the meeting?
Well, it's after the meeting, and of course, since we didn't get to hear what the content or substance of the meeting was, we don't know. But it was a sort of novel defense. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer myself, but every lawyer I know says that there is no attorney-client privilege when you're simply talking to somebody else with attorneys present. So we're going to need to get to the bottom of that.
What's interesting is if this were in a court of law, the judge would say, no, that's insufficient. You guys don't have that ability. If he's not going to answer, he's not going to answer. You have no, was there any way of trying to force him to answer this question? Do you have any powers to compel him?
Well, sure, and I mean, this is the ultimate trump card, pardon the pun. Congress, in its investigations, does not need to acknowledge any privilege, right, including attorney-client privilege. Now, he was there voluntarily, and in the course of this investigation, the chairman, Mike Conaway, who's doing, by the way, a terrific and fair job, has said to witnesses that if you're here voluntarily, we're not going to compel testimony. So we may need to sort of subpoena him or get him back under a compulsory process.
Oh, is there a process to compel him to testify that isn't a subpoena?
There may be, but the point is he was there voluntarily, and so the rule have been if you're here voluntarily, we're not going to force you to answer questions.
All right, I know you guys had a lot of questions for him. I am curious to see, there'd always been this discussion about whether the president, when the meeting was disclosed, the president was on Air Force One on his first overseas trip, and there was some reporting that the president himself helped draft the initial statement by his son. Now, here's what the president's lawyer said to me in July on this issue.
The president was not involved in the drafting of the statement and did not issue the statement. It came from Donald Trump Jr. So that's what I can tell you, because that's what we know. And again, Donald Trump Jr. has said the same thing, that it was in fact from him.
Does that statement still hold up based on your questioning of Donald Trump Jr. last
Well, again, because of this sort of novel claim of privilege, we don't know what happened in that conversation.
So he used this privilege claim to just not describe any conversations he had with his father, period?
No, just this particular conversation. And again, why decide that you're not going to talk about that particular conversation? This is a prevailing theme in this investigation, right? There are things that are lied about up front, that are obfuscated, that are forgotten. And, you know, you ask yourself if, you know, why would he seek to protect that particular conversation? It obviously makes the investigators that much more curious about what the content was.
You've already,
So I think in a few states there might be a privilege talking to a father and son, or to parent and child, where the child is a juvenile, and there might, I think in some states that might be the case, but certainly an adult talking to their parent, the attorney's going to have one client, and that's where there's an attorney-client privilege, and that privilege is actually messed up if there's some third party, unprivileged party, as part of the that's why when you want to have an attorney-client privilege conversation, you have to kick everybody out of the room who doesn't work for the attorney. You know, like, you can have other employees of the attorney there because they're part of the privilege, but you can't have like random third parties there, or it's not a privileged conversation because there's a third party there who can testify as to what the person said. So that is totally bogus. And it's also a little bit bogus that neither Chuck Todd nor Jim Hines, the Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, sorry, I said Judiciary maybe at the beginning, but House Intelligence Committee, neither of them really know how to compel testimony. You can't compel testimony from a witness who's not subpoenaed, because that witness doesn't have to be there. They're there of their own accord, and if they are asked a question they don't like, they can just get up and leave, right? There's no reason they can't get up and leave at any time. So there's no way to compel someone who's not subpoenaed. But once they are subpoenaed, they can be compelled through contempt of Congress, but that requires the Republicans. So all that discussion of what might happen, that's not going to happen unless the Republicans agree, or unless we get over to 2019 and the Democrats have taken over the House of Representatives, which is something I really, really hope happens. And you can let me know what you think about all that. I'm kind of over time here. I want to finish up. I do really appreciate all of you who showed up for the live show. I think it got to almost 250 people, over 250 people at one point, so that's awesome to have all those live viewers in addition to my live studio audience over there. Sandy, who's still, I don't know, is she awake? I think she may have fallen asleep because it's been kind of a long show. That's why I'm over time, like I said, but I will be back next week, probably around the same time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, to give you my Sunday live clip roundup, and I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out. Like I said, you can support me not just through those super chat contributions that the live viewers give me that I really appreciate, but also on Patreon by becoming a patron, a monthly subscriber through a link I put down in the video description. You can also just give me a thumbs up or post a positive comment. I enjoy those and read all the comments that people post, and I did have the opportunity to post a video of Sandy earlier this week, as I mentioned, when Senator Al Franken resigned. I have been thinking of doing a live stream or maybe even an edited, produced video analyzing the Masterpiece Cake Shop case from the Supreme Court and using a couple clips of Anthony Kennedy during oral arguments that became available a few days ago. You can let me know down in the comment section if you'd like me to give my legal analysis of that case from Colorado as to whether Colorado can force bakers to make gay wedding cakes that, I don't know, that will almost definitely get demonetized, which is why I need the extra super chat and Patreon support. And anyway, if you like what I'm doing, you can support me through all those different methods, and maybe I'll make some video this week, although it's another very, very busy week for a variety of reasons. And anyway, until next week or until I make some other video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.